Have you ever noticed a strange pattern in your relationships? You meet someone new, and at first everything feels exciting. They're interesting, a little mysterious, maybe even charming in a quiet way. But after some time, something begins to feel different. They start pulling away. Their messages become shorter. Their attention becomes inconsistent. And suddenly you find yourself trying harder, thinking more about what you said, waiting longer for replies, wondering if you did something wrong. Eventually, the realization hits you. They're emotionally unavailable. But then a more uncomfortable question appears. Why does this keep happening? Why do some people seem to find warm, loving partners, while others repeatedly end up with people who feel distant? Psychology suggests something surprising. The answer often has less to do with them and more to do with what feels familiar to your brain. The human mind is strange in one important way. It doesn't always seek what is healthy. It seeks what is familiar, even if that familiarity comes from experiences that were never good for us. Think about childhood for a moment. Not every childhood is chaotic or traumatic, but many people grow up in environments where emotional connection is inconsistent. Maybe affection was there sometimes, but other times it disappeared. Maybe love came with conditions. Maybe attention had to be earned. Or maybe emotions simply weren't talked about. When this happens, a child learns something subtle but powerful. Love feels uncertain. Love feels unpredictable. And when this pattern becomes normal, the brain quietly stores it as a template. Years later, when you meet someone new, your brain doesn't just evaluate them logically, it also scans for something deeper, familiar emotional patterns. And strangely enough, emotionally unavailable people often feel familiar, not necessarily comfortable, but recognizable. Their distance triggers something you already understand. The chase. The effort. The feeling of trying to win someone's affection. And when you finally get small moments of attention from them, it feels incredibly rewarding, almost addictive. Psychologists sometimes compare this to something called intermittent reinforcement. It's the same mechanism that makes gambling so addictive. When rewards appear randomly, the brain becomes even more attached. In relationships, this can look like someone being warm and affectionate one day and distant the next. Those small moments of closeness start to feel extremely valuable. You hold on to them. You wait for them. You try harder to earn them again. But over time, something exhausting begins to happen. You start investing more energy into the relationship than the other person. You become the one maintaining the emotional connection, the one initiating conversations, the one trying to fix things when something feels off. And eventually you feel drained, confused, maybe even rejected. But here's something important to understand. This pattern does not mean there is something wrong with you. In fact, many people who experience this are deeply empathetic and emotionally aware. They notice subtle changes in people's moods. They care deeply about connection. And they are often willing to put real effort into relationships. The problem is that these qualities can sometimes attract the wrong dynamic. Emotionally unavailable people often feel safe around someone who does most of the emotional work. Someone patient, someone understanding, someone willing to wait. But that balance slowly becomes unequal, and over time the relationship starts revolving around their emotional availability instead of mutual connection. At some point, you may start asking yourself a painful question. Why do I keep ending up here? Why does this feel so familiar? The truth is that breaking this pattern isn't about finding better people. It's about changing what feels emotionally normal to you. That process takes awareness. It means noticing the difference between intensity and genuine connection. Sometimes emotionally unavailable people create strong initial chemistry. But chemistry is not the same thing as emotional safety. Healthy relationships often feel different. They feel calm, consistent, predictable. And strangely, that kind of stability can feel unfamiliar at first. Sometimes even boring. Not because it actually is, but because your brain hasn't learned to associate stability with love yet. When you've spent years chasing emotional closeness, receiving it freely can feel strange, but over time the mind can learn something new. That love doesn't have to be a puzzle to solve. It doesn't have to feel uncertain. And it doesn't require constant effort to keep from disappearing. Real connection is something very different. It feels steady, mutual, and safe. And once your brain begins to recognize that difference, the kinds of people you feel drawn to often begin to change as well. Because the patterns we repeat in relationships are not permanent. They're simply the ones our minds learned first. And anything learned can eventually be unlearned.